Welcome back to another edition of the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast. We are your host. He's the Stallion. I am the Enforcer. This week we have a very special guest. You might know him from the Stiff Shots podcast, Thrashers, Slashers, and the Road to WrestleMania. This is Hell, Extinction AD, Soldiers, Subterfuge, personal trainer extraordinaire, Rick Jimenez, man. Thank you for joining the show. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm happy to be on a recording where I don't have to do the work. I'm just going to hang out.
Doing the work kind of sucks, you know, like it's a lot of pressure. We just spoke to Big Damo, aka Killian Dane, a couple of days ago, and preparing for that, I was like, yeah, like we could talk, and like we start talking, and I'm like, it's an hour and 20 minutes goes by, and I was like, I got to steer this ship somewhere, and I'm not good at that, so. First and foremost, I thought maybe we could just do like 25 or 35 minutes on why Ed Lee is the best human. He's
ultimate team player.
Yep.
Reliable.
Yep. Such a great quality to have.
Under the radar humor.
Yep.
He's not big and boisterous.
Nope.
So, and you know, he's pretty even keel.
Yeah.
But you know, he's gonna hit you with this one-liner that he's not gonna deliver like it's a joke. And it's not, you know, always, because he's not like a fucking comedian, but he is a funny dude.
And it stings. And when he hits you. So, yeah, Ed's the man. Ed's a good friend of mine. And but before we get into, I mean, there's so much we could talk about, but I want to let you know how you indirectly influenced my entire life, Rick. So.
Oh, I can't wait.
I think I might have told the story on your Facebook or something at one point, or on Instagram. I was a fat Ute with a bowl haircut at the Comac AMF bowling alley. And I was wearing a Limp Bizkit shirt one day. And Tim or Tom, one of the two twins that work there, saw my shirt. And he's like, dude, you listen to that pussy hardcore? I'm 12. I'm like, no, I don't know. Like, I'm already the chubby kid. The older kid's talking to me. And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, you got to stay for a show tonight. I was like, I don't know if I'm allowed. I'm 12, you know. So.
Oh, you weren't there for the show?
No, I wasn't. I used to work at the bowling alley.
Okay.
Okay. Fat, young, worked at a bowling alley. I'm really checking all the boxes here. So I was wearing my Limp Bizkit shirt. I'll never forget. It was my black backwards hat, New York Fred Durst with the red on the front. Okay. And I stayed for a show at the Comac bowling alley. And I think that night it was Subterfuge, Center of Zero, Strong Point, maybe 48 in the basement. I don't know. I don't know what this was. I was 12 or 13, so 1999, whatever that means. And that literally took my new metal, corn-loving direction of life and shifted me all this way to this whole genre of music that 23 years later, I have not left. And you were in Subterfuge at that time, and I'm sure you probably played in like 4 other bands that were on the show. Yeah. So that's my first introduction to you, hardcore music, punk rock, and anything. So I think I owe you a thank you.
Oh, dude, no, that's so awesome. You know what's so cool about that? Aside from everything, that could have went such a different direction. And I don't mean that like in your life. I mean like. Especially like what is very, at that time at least, very accepted as far as like hardcore, I don't want to say behavior, but the kind of attitude that could have went, oh, you like this, anything else in the world that's not hardcore? You're a fucking poser. You suck. Some other joke. Now we're going to go in a corner and like make fun of you. The end.
Right.
The fact that it's like, oh, you like that? Like, well, I don't really like that. But if you like heavy stuff, dude, stay for this. You might dig this. Just, it's such a tiny difference in almost like saying the same thing, but like, you know, like a positive thing. And like you said, that like, and just like anybody else, when you like, I guess, some type of heavy music and you wind up getting into hardcore or punk or even, you know, underground metal, if you're welcomed and kind of, you know, pushed in the right direction, as opposed to like, oh, you're not welcome here, get out of here, that really changes your life. Because, you know, hardcore and punk and metal, it is all consuming usually when you first dive in. Because it's like, it's like almost like a whole different world you didn't know existed. Otherwise, music before that was like, oh, music is like pretty cool.
Yeah,
As opposed
exactly.
to like, this is like not a spectator sport. Everybody is involved as much or as little as you want. And if you get that bug, it's kind of unlike anything else.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Dude, I am excited that anybody at any point has paid attention to anything. I don't even want to say that I've said because, I don't understand why anybody would pay attention to anything I say. But anybody that's ever given credence to anything I've done musically at all, let alone, oh, I saw you play once and it was cool, so I came again, and then I came again, and then I bought a record, and then I listened to your other band. Like, that's amazing. That is like, I can't believe that I've had the privilege of playing music for as long as I've done it and been able to do it on any level aside from just, fucking around with some of my friends that I was able to convince to like hang out with me to play music for 20 minutes.
Other than the Comac bowling alley in a small nursery that had like little dinosaurs and elephants on the wall in a disgusting carpeted area, and some of like the hardest shows I've ever seen. Or Madball, I think, was there. I could go on and on, but so yeah, and it's very similar to wrestling, right? Wrestling's kind of like that because once you first get introduced to wrestling, it's like, oh, wrestling seems pretty cool, and especially in this day and age, like I know Joe is a huge deathmatch guy now. Joe watches all. I'm just kidding. The dude fucking hates deathmatch.
Okay.
He's a big Nick Gage guy. He's got light
Yeah.
tubes in his house.
It doesn't stop you from sending me Instagram videos of guys taking like ridiculous bumps into like thumbtacks and glass and scissors in their arm and stuff like that. I get that stuff from him all the time, even though he knows I can't stand watching that.
Listen,
junk.
sometimes you got to pizza cut a motherfuckers, right? You're gonna right in the But yeah, I mean that music is the same way, and especially at like a young age when something grabs you, you're like, oh, okay. And then, but back then, 99, 2000, 2001, you had zines? You had zines, and you had like really bad like WordPress websites where like you couldn't share things like you could today. I remember the old lihc.net was like my go-to home where I went to Reach the Sky. It was Subterfuge, Reach the Sky, and Most Precious Blood in a blizzard in Deer Park, and I still talk about that show all the time.
Long Out.
Long Out LAHQ, right? Or
yes, yeah. That was Most Precious Blood, Reach the Sky, The Promise, Subterfuge, and On the Rise.
Yeah. And
what an amazing show.
That was like the peak for me, and I was like, yeah, I'm totally into this. And somebody stage dove, and The Promise was playing, and they snapped the bassist's bass right in half. I'll never forget that. I was like, what the fuck is going on? I was like, so that got the bug. So today, I think I am who I am because of the Comac AMF bowling alley and hardcore music. So, and like in a roundabout way, thank you for making me this person who reads a WCW magazine from 1992 in the year 2021.
Oh, but, right up my alley.
Dude, that's I mean, so you have a bunch of podcasts. Thrashers, Slashers, and The Road to WrestleMania, I think is the coolest idea. Joe and I have this belief that nothing today is as good as it was in the year 1985. Do you share that?
No. But I would probably say nothing today is as good as it was in the year 1990.
Okay.
So 1990 is like my benchmark year of
okay. Life. So that's like the barometer, right?
That's the barometer, man, because so I will argue, and the only reason why I won't say I will fight over it is because that's already like Jamie Josta's gimmick, but I will argue with anybody about the Black Album, Metallica Black Album, being just as good as anything else in the world. But 1990, Metallica is still on the Injustice for All run. Rust in Peace had just come out. NWA is like at their peak. I mean, here's another thing that people think I'm stupid for saying. I think the second NWA album is better than the first, Straight Outta Compton. That's everyone's go-to. I had been into wrestling, but 1990 was the year that wrestling consumed my life. My two favorite wrestling matches ever are both in 1990. I remember like every detail about my birthday party in 1990.
Okay, so that was the year. Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot then. If that was Rick's benchmark year, what is yours?
Mine's probably 89, so it's very close, because that's when I picked up pro wrestling, and that's kind of when I remember. I'm a big sports guy. I mean, I'm into music as well, but music I kind of got into in like '93. So that's when I first started remembering stuff and sports specifically. But when it comes to wrestling, the first pay-per-view I ever watched was SummerSlam '89. And then I got, again, like the VHS tapes where you couldn't even fit like a 3-hour pay-per-view on one tape. So I had like 2 tapes of Survivor Series '89 and watching those things. So, and then it kind of goes into the whole, like, so that was really, so you mentioned 1990, right? And you said you had 2 favorite matches, which I'm interested to know if one of those is Hogan Warrior and what the other one might be. But, that led right into like Hogan losing to Warrior. And I didn't have a concept at that point of how long Hogan had really been champion, and what everything had happened before with Andre and all that stuff, until I started really getting into it and renting the older tapes. So that's probably the benchmark for me. But is Hogan Warrior one of the 2 of your favorite matches, or am I off the mark?
No, Hogan Warrior is my number 1 favorite match of all time.
Wow.
Ultimate Warrior was my favorite wrestler growing up, and Ultimate Warrior, it's hard to say that he's not now. Eventually, Ric Flair overtook it. But it's so hard because, Warrior is my childhood. Dude, I thought I was the Ultimate Warrior for a good, 2 years. Like, doing the whole, like, arm thing, like, running through the halls at school, and, like, a teacher's yelling at you. So I'm gonna, like, snarl and, like, pound my chest. Like, dude, what are you doing? Especially me then. I was 10 years old then. I was probably, like, 50 pounds. 1A, July 7th, we just passed the anniversary, Ric Flair versus Sting, when Sting wins his first title. Those 2 matches, the only reason why I don't watch those matches, like, super consistently, and by super consistently, like, I'll try not to watch those matches more than once a year, is because I worry that I'm going to get sick of them, even though it's like, 31 years now. Yeah. But those 2 matches, especially like when you're 10 years old, when you're a kid, you love repetition. That's why little kids, like, they find a Disney movie and they watch it like every single day. They might watch it twice a day.
Mighty Ducks too.
Okay. Dude, I was like that with WrestleMania 6. I was like that with the first MSG event that I videotaped,
right,
from
on MSG back in the day.
Yeah, from May 1990. I watched that over and over again. Clash of Champions 11 and Great American Bash 90. Those 4 shows I just watched over and over and over again, and it seems like I did it constantly. And I actually only did that for a couple of months, but when you're 10, a couple of months is such a long time. So, those shows, dude, at one point, like, I woke up, on like a weekend when you're home from school, and I was watching the August Saturday Night's Main Event from 1990. If you remember the Saturday Night's Main Events, the main event was of the card was first, and as you went on through the event, the matches got
right, because it started after Saturday Night Live.
Yeah,
it was so late.
So I remember I got up one morning and I was watching that, and before the main event was Warrior versus Rude, and it's before SummerSlam 90. So even though in like 2 weeks they're about to fight for the title in the cage, they're having a regular one-on-one match on TV. It got to a point where I was like, I think I like know this match by heart. So it's like 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday. I put this tape in, I'm watching it, and I didn't say this in this vernacular then, but now I'm sitting up and out loud to nobody, calling the spots before they happened to make sure I know the match by heart. And after it was done, and this is like, could be a false memory, but the way I remember it now, when it's over, I'm like, this is ridiculous that I know this match by heart. Like, out of all the things, like, not that it matters, every kid in elementary school is like a smart kid, but I was like a smart kid in elementary school, was in like the advanced class, like you get to leave class and go to these
oh yeah, the special classes, like the AP classes for elementary kids. Yeah.
And once 1990 hit, or late 89 and through 90, I started to suck at school because all I cared about was wrestling. I remember there was like, they had to straight up like have a conversation with me like, hey, why do you suck at school? And I remember being like, well, because this stuff is easy. I don't care about it. But like, this is what I care about. Hey, you want me to tell you what happens like with the third spot in Ravishing Recruits Ultimate Warrior is?
See, that's amazing to me. Like, I'm a little bit younger, so I was 10 in 1996 when it was all, you know, the beginning of Stone Cold and stuff like that. But I go back and I look at it from, you know, 2021 eyes, and I'm like, 1985 had three things that will live on in infamy for me. It had the beginning of Miami Vice. Miami Vice, the single greatest show of all time. It had, without a doubt, that one I will fight anybody for. Crockett and Tubbs, the fucking day I die. It had that. It had Starcade: The Gathering, and it also had one of my favorite movies of all time, Fright Night. So, like, to me, 1985 is like, after that, like, things are good, and then like once 91 hits and the Gulf War and Hogan and all that stuff, I kind of, it goes down a little bit because I wasn't old enough at a younger age to appreciate it. So now I go back and I'll watch stuff from like 89, 90, and 91. And like, even like the NWA, 88, 89, after Crockett gave up and became WCW, like when I was a kid, I was like, oh man, this shit's awesome. Now I go back and I'm watching stuff from 83, 84, 85, 86. I'm like, this is the awesome stuff. I caught it on like the down, you know, the decline at that point. So it's like, what do you value more, what you had as a kid, or what, like, and I'll go back and look at the 95, 96 stuff from WWE and be like, why the fuck did I care about TL Hopper? Like, at the time, like, that stuff was terrible. Even though Duke the Dumpster Drosy did work for my aunt in Florida at an ice plant, and right before he got hired in the WWE, and there's a picture of him holding up, gorilla pressing my aunt at the job. So I was like, oh man, Duke Drosy. But when I was, so it's funny because when I was 10, I was finding something else. I was finding ECW, and that's when shit changed for me. I mean, and you know, staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning and watching New Jack dive off a balcony. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Yeah. I'm like, this shit is amazing. Now, Joe, did you find ECW in like 96, 97, or did you have it before?
I picked it up, I think, at the end of 98. So I missed some of the earlier stuff, like the Raven Dreamer type period, like in some of those earlier angles. Yeah. So like I picked it up in like mid to late 98 after like I had that brief exposure to some of the guys when they appeared on Raw in 97, and I was like, I didn't really know what it was. And then you know, again, you rent some tapes, you kind of read some stuff on the internet at that point in time, which was blowing up with all these wrestling sites, and that's when I picked it up. So kind of like when RVD was getting bigger, and it was right before Taz ended up winning the world title. I think he won it at Guilty as Charged 99 back in like January of that year. So that's kind of when I picked it up until the end. So I think I was into it for maybe like 2.5 years, and then obviously it kind of folded at that point.
I apologize that it got ruined for you like that. 2.5 years, and then in second grade, we used to have this thing. I don't know why this just reminded me. Second grade, we used to have this thing where there'd be a huge piece of paper, and you put like the daily to-do list in class on this piece of paper, and then everybody, each day, a different person gets to write it. They take it home and they keep it. I have it in my room. It's 1:30 in the morning, and I had a friend over, as kids do. So I was in second grade, so we're looking at 93, 94. And I see ECW, and it's a clip of Extreme Warfare Volume 1 at that point. So on this thing from school, I write down the number. And I begged my mom to let me call this number and order ECW Extreme Warfare. It wasn't Volume 2, the night that Kimona Wanalea danced atop the ECW arena. It was night 1. It was the first one. And I think it was Dreamer falling off the scaffold, and my eyes were just like, dude, what am I watching? And I had that forever. And ECW was like the thing that kind of changed my professional wrestling life. And, you know, we were talking about music before, how there's like this underground thing. It is so similar to wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Especially now, like it is literally all encompassing. You could watch wrestling every night of the week, and you can get your fill like for free on YouTube. You can get it on fucking Peacock. You can get it on, IWTV, which we love, and stuff like that. So it's a great time to dive in and just expand your horizon. Like, what else you can like? Are we still in a pandemic? Does anybody know? Is that still going on?
No.
Okay, so we're not in the pandemic anymore. That's good. But like during the pandemic, that was like one of those things. Like I caught up. Joe got OTT, like over the top wrestling. I watched some stuff from Ireland that I'm like, there's so much here for you to just sink your teeth into. When was your first experience of something that wasn't WCW or WWE or F?
You know what? One of my biggest. Ready for a stupid sentence?
Yes.
One of my biggest regrets. One of my biggest regrets in life is the same thing. Spring of 1990, 4:00 on Sports Channel. Every single day, they would show USWA. Now, it wasn't always what's happening at that time. I don't know what the schedule breakdown was. I don't even know if it was consistent at all, but it was what I know now, some CWA, some WCCW, and USWA. So it was almost like every week they would show a week of shows or like 5 consistent shows in a row, and then you don't know what you're going to get the next week. So it would be like what I think I remember now, kind of like WCCW from 1988 for 1 week. And then the next week would be what's actually happening in 1990 on USWA. And the next week, it might be like 1989 CWA. But it was kind of the same people because it all became, the similar thing. I regret so much that I never recorded any of that stuff because I was like, oh, this is cool because it's wrestling. Like, oh, wait a minute. Like, that's Kerry Von Erich, who is now the Texas Tornado in WWF, but this is beforehand.
With two feet. That's good.
Yeah. So that's how I found out about Jerry Lawler, Jeff Jarrett, Steve Austin, and what was her before she was Lady Blossom in WCW? Jenny, or I don't remember what it doesn't matter.
No, but you hate not knowing these. I'm the same way.
Yeah. But so the only thing that I have from that is I put like my boombox up to the TV and recorded the theme song, not the theme song to the show, but like the entrance theme. But now that it was on Sports Channel and it's 1990, so it's not ECW in the later 90s on MSG, I guess they were afraid of copyright. So every single wrestler had the same entrance theme, and it was just overdubbed. So I have that on a cassette still, and that song is like just hilarious. But I never recorded the actual video. So, dude, it was like almost right away that I was like, oh, there's something else aside from what I knew of as just NWA, the promotion, not the rap group I was talking about earlier, and WWF. So I always knew there was other stuff. So then once I became obsessed, I would look through, this even before like the Blue Channel, which was the like the TV Guide channel.
Channel 14.
Yeah, I would look through the TV Guide and just like scour it and look for like wrestling. So GWF.
Yeah,
I think when Global
that's what I was
going to
go to. Yeah.
And I would get Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine and look through all the other promotions there. So I would like recognize names. So I'd be like, oh, GWF, that's where Jeff Gaylord is. I need to watch GWF. So I would tune in again to, Sports Channel or ESPN at, 10 p.m. on a Thursday. And it was like, what are you doing? You're 10 years old. You have to get up for school. I was like, come on, I need to watch Jeff Gaylord. Like, who the fuck is Jeff Gaylord? I was like, I don't know. He's in the magazine. It's wrestling. Gotta watch it.
Nobody needed to watch Jeff Gaylord, but that's like the most 1990 thing I've ever heard, with you with your boombox by the TV. Joe, did you ever watch IWCCW?
I did. No, I didn't. What year or era is that from?
IWCCW, I stumbled upon on ESPN in 1991, and they had this guy. His name was the Heartthrob Chaz. This fucking blew my mind. He was in a bungee cord match where him and another dude were in the top of a cherry picker, and they were both attached to a bungee cord, and the winner was the guy that launched the other dude out of his little cherry picker. And I was like, as a kid, I was like, I didn't know what I was watching or how terrible it was. I thought it was the coolest thing. Meanwhile, it's like the worst scaffold match ever. You're fighting in a phone booth. And that was it for me until ECW came around, and which just kind of, just changed the game forever. So if you were 10 in 1990, you were like the prime age for the Attitude Era then, right? Like you were 17 in 97. That had to be the coolest thing going.
Oh yeah, you know what? Because once like I said, obsessed with wrestling, just overtook everything. Once I started, playing music with other people, I was like, all right, well, I still love wrestling. And like, dude, I have like, obviously like an obsessive personality. So like, all right, I love wrestling. I'm obsessed with wrestling. I love comic books. I'm obsessed with that. But then, obviously I was always into music, but it was all kind of, that's all hobbies. Once I started playing in bands, it was like, oh, you know what? My band, we need to practice 5 days a week. Like when we're not practicing, we need to just like hang out and like talk about how good the band is, even though like, obviously, your first couple of bands, you suck. So I kind of fell off. I never stopped watching wrestling, but I fell off with being obsessed with it. Which that time period too, like, late 95 and early 96, it's that time where like, what's more important right now? Playing drums 5 times a week and only watching wrestling, like when it's on TV 4 times a week, or obsessing with wrestling. So like, all right, so I'll just do that. So I kind of did that for a couple of months, which at that time felt like forever, until the Attitude Era started, bubbling. So once Austin goes to WWF, I'm like, oh, I love Austin from, like I said, he was one of the first guys that I knew pre, one of the big companies. Once he goes to WCW, I'm like, oh, hey everyone, I already know who this guy is. He's like, he's sick. They're like, oh, the guy with like the surfer shorts? I was like, yeah, and his hot girlfriend.
It was Medusa, right? Yeah.
So I'm psyched on Steve Austin. His whole WCW run is great until they break up the Hollywood Blondes. I was like devastated because I love that team. That was my favorite tag team of that point. Their entrance theme is still hard as hell and some weird time signature. So he, gets fired from WCW. He's in ECW. I know about ECW, but I'm not watching ECW at that point. He's in WWF. I'm like, this is what they're doing with Steve Austin. Even back then, I was like,
damn them.
And then it's like, oh, well, he ditched the $1 million belt. And, he got rid of his haircut. Wins King of the Ring. Does everything that, the Austin character becomes. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then, he's all of a sudden he's kind of like on fire. And then the NWO happens. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. And despite revisionist history, a bit at least, the like 96 things change in the middle, but there's still a lot of like silly shit. The Dungeon of Doom is still happening.
I mean, we're not using silly shit in the Dungeon of Doom in the same sentence, right? Because the shark, I mean, like, dude, Kevin Sullivan was great in everything he did. I mean, again, revisionist history. I was 10 in 96, and I'm like, holy shit, they're going to kill Hulk Hogan in the quadruple fucking Tower of Doom 37-man cage match. It was Hulk and Macho versus everybody.
See, at that point, if I was 10, I probably would have been super psyched on it. Being 16 and knowing that girls exist, and also knowing that like I could like play drums constantly, and like, well, I like comic books, but I like my comic books and my wrestling to be separate. This is what I'm thinking then.
Right.
So I was never a hater. I was never I never once would be like, oh, wrestling isn't cool. Never. I would argue with somebody over that. But I would say like, Kevin Sullivan doesn't do it for me in 96, even, 97. But as like 97 comes in and the Attitude Era starts, you know, really becoming what it becomes, I wouldn't say it's perfect in any world. It was perfect for a 17-year-old in 1997, especially like, oh, Attitude Era is cool. Where does that stem from? Oh, well, let me go back and really start paying attention to ECW. Like, oh man, I'm into hardcore at this point, like full on. You know, I'm going to shows on Long Island. I'm going to shows in New York City. So I'm like, dude, I'm hardcore, even though same thing. I'm 17 at that point. I'm probably like 105 pounds. Like, I'm a little twerp, but I'm obsessed with hardcore lifestyle, music, everything in the same, like it kind of took that obsession away from the other things.
You can only focus on so much, right? Like, no matter how addicted to something you are, you can't have like 10 addictions at the same time.
Then I couldn't. I wish I could not have that now, because it would make more sense for my brain. But then it's like, oh, well, wrestling is kind of going in that hardcore direction in the way that my musical tastes went from like metal,
Mainstream, or
yeah, into like that hardcore underground way. I was like, these things like really kind of coincide. And then, you know, the late 90s mainstream went that way, you know, overall, which sounds like so weird saying like, oh, I'm not saying mainstream went hardcore by any means, but, you know, mainstream it was okay to, you know, be super aggro and to, you know, that Jerry Springer era and like
there was a lot of
everywhere.
You look back on now and you're like, how did we get away with that in 1999?
Exactly.
Like, I don't think we can do that anymore. You know,
and you know, I'm glad things went that way, because that's when I was able to be like, oh, you know what, I can obsess over hardcore and my band, as well as wrestling, as well as like hanging out and just being like a dumbass teenager around that time. And it all intertwined, you know. So you got the, like you said, the attitude that WCW or, you know, more so WWF had at that time. And if it was like, oh, well, I'm like a little too cool for that, like, dude, ECW. So we were talking about early ECW before. My opinion, there is no bad era of ECW. There was some times that are like a bit more important, you know, and I think a lot of times that importance is because it was the first. So the first run and like the first character development of Tommy Dreamer and Raven and Sandman and RVD and Shane Douglas, all of that. So I understand when people are like, well, that is the best era of ECW, 96 and 97. I won't argue that, but I will argue, just because that's the most glorified era, everything that came after that is not bad. In my opinion, ECW was good until its last show. I loved the TNN run. I loved all the hardcore TV, every single thing. ECW could take... Dude, you want to talk about polishing a turd?
Mikey Whipwreck?
Dude, anything that came through ECW's doors, even if they didn't turn that turd into a golden nugget, they sure did try their hardest. And in my opinion, that is ECW's legacy. You know, you take somebody like Johnny Swinger. Yeah. When he first comes in, kind of jobberish, 98, 99. And then if you're from the future at that point and you say, yo, Johnny Swinger, C.W. Anderson, and, you know, Julio De Niro and Doring are going to be in a pay-per-view at the end of 99, early 2000, and it's going to make sense. Come on, get out of here. Then you go to mid or late 2000s. That's exactly what C.W. Anderson was. He was on his way to becoming a top guy at the end of ECW.
It's because of Tommy Dreamer putting him over in the I Quit match. Well, he got over in the I Quit match. He didn't put him over, but yeah, that feud made him for sure.
Exactly. That is just what ECW did, and to me, that is like the epitome. That's what I think. That's what I think of when people say, "Oh, ECW was like hardcore wrestling." That's what I think of more than I think, like deathmatch stuff, like weapons and stuff. Like, yeah, but that's not what comes to my head first when people are like, with the moniker hardcore wrestling. I don't think of the deathmatch and the quote unquote garbage match. I think of the underground and the passion and the blood and the sweat that goes into it. And I mean, and the cliche that Heyman made so famous in the DVD, hide the negatives, accentuate the positives. Right. And dude, that is so important to do, not just in wrestling, but and not even just in any form of entertainment. Just, dude, do that in life. If you could do that in life, you're like a fucking success.
Yeah, there are so many things I'm not good at that I don't even try to be good at, and I kind of just like stay in my lane. I'm like, I'm good at like 3 things. Like, let's just focus on that. Joe, as somebody who became like the ECW fan in like '98, do you agree with that? You went back? I mean, I know you've watched, pretty much up to '98 and then after '98. What do you think? Because it was. I mean, it's almost like a tale of two cities, right? Like the up into '96, it was like. I look at ECW, and Joe, tell me if you agree with me, before Barely Legal and after Barely Legal.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, again, I think a lot of it, at least in terms of my, viewing of the shows, was the talent that they would have, right? So that point when it gets to like the 98, right, when people say, I guess, maybe the popular opinion is that it drops off a little bit. That's when a lot of guys started to leave, right? Raven went to WCW, he took Richards with him, different guys were going and doing different things. And then at the end, I was at the last pay-per-view they ever had. And, it was just incredible. It was, Jerry Lynn, that Sandman had come back by that point, right? He had left and then come back. Bigelow had come and gone by that point, and they were trying to put over newer guys, but I just think like the name value of who they had at that point in time was tough to sell, right, for like a mainstream type audience. I think they still had their hardcore fans and they were still selling tickets to shows. People were still going. I mean, that building was sold out when I went. But, they just didn't have that star power that they once had before. And with guys jumping to WCW and the WWF was so popular at that point, it was hard, Taz was gone, like Dreamer was really the only guy left. RVD, I remember at that point on the last show, I'm not even sure if he had a contract. I mean, he showed up as like a surprise because he hadn't been on TV for a while, and like, he's gonna kind of rekindle something with Jerry Lynn, and then ended up not having another pay-per-view after that. So, it was an interesting kind of period of time. I think if you just look at the talent pool, their first couple of years was probably more entertaining or interesting. But the booking was always kind of, it's always Heyman, right? So he's gonna take guys and try to elevate them as best he can. But the level of talent they had at the end, I don't think was where it was the first maybe 5 or 6 years of ECW.
Yeah, and if you look at like 95, 96, when you had the Cruiserweight, I mean, you had, I can't say his name, you had Chris Benoit, you had Eddie Guerrero, you had Juventud, you had Psychosis, you had Rey Mysterio Jr., like those matches in 95, and like the Pitbulls, who were never great workers, but dude, Thunderkiss 65 hits, and that place goes fucking bananas. Like that look, you had Francine doing Francine stuff, you had the Dreamer and Raven, and then the greatest thing I think ECW ever did was for a year, they would not let Taz and Sabu touch. And when the lights went out and Taz and Sabu were in the ring together and Taz was standing like this and Sabu was pointing, like that moment, that's like one of those moments that I feel like will never, ever be able to be recreated. And I don't think that you can't have long-term storytelling like that. Although I know we're running long here, but I was just thinking, Rick, I'd love for you to come back and we could do like a part 2 on this, and we can get into like WWE and AEW and all this stuff, because there was actually a part in time when Joe dropped off of wrestling forever because of one person. Not forever, for like a good 2 or 3 years, and I did it at the same time, and we weren't like super close back then, and his name was JBL. And JBL is actually true
That's
story. JBL is what caused me to leave wrestling for 2 years.
there's all sorts of stories I can tell you around that, but that's different.
Yeah,
That's
and
the
I would
conversation.
love to do a part 2 on that because this is just
Yeah, totally.
But that storytelling between Dreamer and Raven and Sabu and Taz, like it was like years worth. Like Dreamer and Raven were feuding. When Raven showed up, like it just changed everything. And Heyman is so good at that. But today, the fans don't have that attention span. I don't think. And I'm not like a crabby old man yelling at clouds, which I don't know. I guess I am. But like everybody wants everything like at your fingertips, right? And AEW, and I don't want to get too much into it, but they're telling this Kenny Omega and Hangman Page storyline, and people want it to happen right away. And it's like, go back and watch Macho and Hogan. The seeds were planted for that story, which might have been the greatest storyline of professional wrestling ever. The seeds were planted for that a year and a half in advance, and I don't think we'll see that anymore, unfortunately, because of the times.
You know what? The main thing, in my opinion, with that, I always tend to first say, yes, people don't have the attention span, which is indisputable. That is 100% true. On the other hand, the big problem with that is just the human evolution and technological evolution. There is too much. There's just too much. 3 hours of Raw. If that was the only program for WWE a week, still too much. Now you're going to add 2 hours of NXT, 2 hours of SmackDown, and then, NXT UK, 205 Live, yada, yada. AEW.
205 Live is still on?
I believe it is, yeah.
They just fired everybody that was on there.
I know. Maybe they're going to collapse it. AEW has 2 hours of Dynamite every week, which that is not too much. Now, an hour and a half of Dark, and then an hour of another Dark, and then we know we're getting another, or one of the YouTube shows going to TBS. Too much stuff. On top of that, AEW smart so far, and I really hope they stick to it. 4 pay-per-views a year, or 5. I will go 4 for my preference, but that's because I'm 75 years old. WWE, 12 or 13 or 15 pay-per-views a year? Dude, what are you? There is no way you could ever get a story to have that build.
That's not the arc, right?
And you know what? You almost don't even want the arc. You just want that incline. Right as it hits its peak, you almost have, not even almost, you have something else there to take its place by the time the blow off happens. Dude, perfect example, and this is so stupid, and this is also just, my frame of reference of like being a child. 89 into 90, the Twin Towers dominating tag team, Big Boss Man and Akeem. Some turmoil between the two that goes on for a couple of weeks, a couple of months. They finally break up. They're gonna fight each other. Finally, you have a 2-month build from the time they break up to getting to their blow off at WrestleMania 6. And like I said, this is not just a stupid example, but there's a dumb angle. A mid-card tag team. Boss Man turns babyface. Akeem is the heel. By the time they have the blow off, as soon as Boss Man even gets down to the ring, he gets attacked by DiBiase, and that is just seeds have been planted. They have a match that's a minute and a half long. I think it's a perfect big man match for the story. So Akeem gets beat. Boss Man, leaves victorious. Like, oh, that's it? No, that's not it. Because Boss Man already has another angle that he's about to start at next week. Like, oh, I beat Akeem. So, like, what's going to happen? Oh, no, this guy attacked him from behind. Like, that's what would happen on Raw now. Then, like, you're already set up. Like, a really, really bad example. But that, in my opinion, has been the way proper booking went through, I would say, even the mid-90s. You don't end something or have the blow off and, like, after that, it's straight up like, okay, what's Jake the Snake gonna do from now on?
Look at when Warrior dropped the title to Slaughter because of Macho Man. So
Exactly. There's that like crossfade of angles right
he
there.
goes this way, this one goes this way, and they both have something to do. It's not like the next night the lights like. I'm a big guy for them. I love when the lights go up. It gets me every time. But like, there's it's not like now because every week on WWE TV or any of them, like, oh, we need a battle royal to have the number one contender. Why? Because you can't fucking book a story. You can't like. There's
exactly
talented people that you shouldn't be like, oh, let's have a tournament. How many tournaments has the WWE done that they? Joe, I sent you a stat earlier today, and they had the percentage of matches on TV that are rematches by brand from July 2020 to June 2021. Percentage that are rematches on Raw, 57%. That means you've seen this. That's 57% of your matches are rematches. SmackDown, 54%. Impact, 44%. NXT, 31%. Dynamite, 10%. So, like,
and look at the size of the rosters of. Let's just pick on WWE here. They have 1,000 wrestlers signed to Raw. They have 900 wrestlers signed to SmackDown. And they have 750 wrestlers signed to NXT.
Yeah.
Why are we doing rematches over half the time? When you guys were younger, did you play with wrestling toys and like actually like book feds and stuff?
I did.
Joe has an E-Fed still.
That's not true. But I wish I did. I wish I did. No, I did. But I did. Yeah, I had wrestling figures. The Hasbro, I think, is whatever they were in like 1989.
Okay.
And yes, I did.
Yeah, man. So I am going to be 41 really soon. The only reason why I still don't play with my toys and book a fed now is because I don't have the time for it. I wish I did. But dude, when I was 10 and doing this, even I knew, okay, I want to have the Warlord fight Rick Martel at Survivor Series. Or, I'm not having singles matches at Survivor Series because I'm a grown up even at SummerSlam. So guess what? From WrestleMania to SummerSlam, the only time these toys are going to touch is if they're starting a fight at an interview segment or if they're in a 6-man tag. Why are these guys fighting from WrestleMania to SummerSlam if they're going to fight at SummerSlam? Hey, you know what? Easy concept. I just explained how to book wrestling to every company in the history of wrestling in 2021. Grow up. Enough of these rematches constantly. Just use your brain a little bit.
And Apollo Crews every week on Raw. They're literally wrestling every fucking week. There was a stat that said Big E wrestled Apollo Crews in some shape or fashion every week on SmackDown since March. It's July. That's a real stat. And they're both good.
And they fought at WrestleMania.
Yeah, they hit a pay-per-view.
Why are we fighting before, during, and then after WrestleMania? The WrestleMania rematch. Oh man, I want to smack someone every time I hear that. It's like if it is like 3 years later, like when they do Undertaker versus Orton on SmackDown in 2008 and Bill, WrestleMania rematch. Okay, I am cool with that. WWE now, and I don't know why I don't know why I'm shitting on WWE so much. I'm usually such a homer for WWE. If I hear the word WrestleMania again until January of 2022, I'm going to smash my screen in the living room. I'm going to come in my bedroom, turn on the TV just to smash that screen too. WrestleMania Backlash. Hey, man.
Dude, it's been Backlash for how many years? And now it has to be WrestleMania Backlash?
Yo, I'm screaming into the microphone, you guys, and that's this thing's fault right now.
No, dude, I'm totally
I'm fueled as hell on this rain right now.
So now that we've talked about these different eras, I guess maybe a good way to tie this together is what is the best era of pro wrestling in general, right? And it's just your opinion, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be money made. It doesn't have to, whatever. Just your enjoyment of overall wrestling, right? We talked about the 80s, we talked about the 90s, we talked about the Attitude Era. People can make a case for things later on with AEW, the Indies, NXT, all that stuff. So what in each of your guys' opinions is the best era of pro wrestling?
Is it so you're saying favorite?
Yeah, your favorite era of pro wrestling in general.
Okay. because
is it by company, Joe, or are we just saying era for everything?
It's overall, right? So we talked about
we
talked about the Attitude Era, and we talked about like ECW as part of that, right? And the NWO and Austin, right? But then you talk about the 80s and, you know, Flair and Hogan and all these guys, and then, you know, and all the different things in between. So just overall enjoyment, right, of pro wrestling. And it doesn't have to be a specified era, right? The Attitude Era. You could just pick a set of years, like, you know, whatever it is that is your personal enjoyment of pro wrestling from when you started until now.
Mine is 88 through 93. And obviously that is my upbringing and, you know, my frame of reference when I discovered wrestling as more than the Hulk Hogan cartoon. But man, anything from, say specifically Royal Rumble 88 all the way through, yeah man, Starrcade 93, I could watch anything from any company of those years and be so excited, even if I can't call every spot to every match anymore. But in my opinion, that stuff all still holds up, but I know my opinion is skewed because I glorify being 8 years old and being 13 years old.
Sure. That's fair. I will say 86 to 91 for me. WWF, NWA, WCW, any of those promotions, like when I go back, my dog agrees. Like when the network was the network, like I would go back. I tweeted them in like 2015 when they first came out. I'm like, can you put years on there so I could watch things chronologically? Because like that's Joe and I, we talk about that. Like I still do that. Like I would watch like the NWA TV and then the Clash of the Champions and then the pay-per-view. And I would watch. That's super helpful. Yeah, I would do that in order, and like any year stuck in there would be fine for me. Towards the end of 91, I'm like, all right, it's getting a little long in the tooth here because it's before that transition. But for me, 86 to 91, and I didn't have the luxury growing up because 86 I was born that year. So like going back and like watching with the 2021 lens, I'm like, oh, this stuff still rules. So, Joe, what do you got?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're all like a year, like a 5-year range or 6-year range, like a year apart, right? So Rick was what you said, 88 to 93,
yeah.
And Mike was 86 to 91. I was gonna say 87 to 92, actually. So we're all kind of very in that same range. Yeah, I mean, I threw 87 in there because that's the Hogan Andre stuff. I think that's really what kind of kicked it. You know, like when I started going back and watching tapes, I always went back to like WrestleMania 3. I didn't really watch WrestleManias 1 or 2 until I was a teenager, just because I didn't really know it was, you know. But I that whole era, and then I include 92 because things do change a little bit that year. Like kind of, not that they go away from Hogan, but they do a little bit because he kind of steps away. And Flair, I have to include a year where Flair was in the WWF at that point. And then equally, I do enjoy WCW in 92, ironically, even when Flair's not there, because there's a lot of different stuff that happens that year. And I'm sure I've talked about this, I don't know how many times, but I love the Dangerous Alliance and that whole storyline and that stuff. So that era to me is where I could, like you said, I could watch any pay-per-view or, you know, Superstars or Saturday Night or whatever, and just because the characters and the wrestlers were so much more protected in that era. You know, they were just beating jobbers, and then when they would wrestle each other, when somebody would lose, somebody would lose, it's a big deal. You know, I didn't see the $1 Million Man lose unless it was SummerSlam or something like that, you know. So we're all, I guess, in the same range. You know, none of us went with the Attitude Era, which is, I think, is interesting. But I guess
Yo, did you love WCW in 1992 because you hated people going over the top rope and jumping off the top rope? Is that what it was?
You know, listen, without
in here that we could be reading about.
Without rules, there's chaos. So you need to have those things set in place, you know, to be able to get through it.
And Rick, listen, as a music person, can you get this album because it's got Cactus Jack on it? It's the WCW music album.
Yeah, dude. Slam Jam.
Is this Slam? You know what? They don't even have a name for it. But all I know is Ron Simmons is watching Cactus Jack perform.
You don't honestly think I don't own that CD?
I would love it if you could take a picture of that and you could post that.
Well, it's definitely packed up in my shed, but at one point I had literally like over 500 CDs. I was like, what am I doing with these CDs? So I was like, I'm gonna sell these CDs on eBay, but I really want to find one person to just buy the whole thing. And somebody bought the whole thing, but I chose like, I think it was like 55 or 75 that I'm keeping. You know, I kept all my Metallica stuff. I kept all my wrestling stuff. So out of all the CDs that I got rid of in my life, I absolutely still have WCW Slam Jam Volume 1. Don't Step to Ron.
Get the fuck out of here.
Man Called Sting.
Man Called Sting, I remember, yeah.
Simply Ravishing.
Yeah.
Dude, I've scoured the internet, and this is like years ago now, but I will put my entrance theme MP3 collection against anybody else's ever. So one time there was written in a magazine that Hornswoggle like had a huge, like, I have all the, I'm imitating his voice, it was in a magazine, that he has the largest, you know, entrance theme collection. So this is like, I think the early days of Twitter, where I was like, yo, I need to see if he has some stuff I don't have. So I couldn't find him on, oh, you know, I texted one of my friends, like, hey, I know this is weird. Do you have Hornswoggle's number? Because I want to ask him this. He's like, yeah. So he gave me Hornswoggle's number, and I texted Hornswoggle, hey, I'm friends with so-and-so. They gave me this number, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for this. He's like, oh, I just got all my stuff off of, like, Kazaa, but I, like, deleted it years ago. I'm like, you fucking idiot. You're like, oh, sir. I didn't call him an idiot. I just said, like, okay, thanks, man. And to myself, I'm like, oh, you idiot. But then I was like, you know what?
Delete the number.
I don't need his. I have all mine. So at that point, WWE didn't have the rights to all the 88, or I think 89, 90, 91, 92 WCW themes, because it was all Turner catalogs.
Right.
So I found a website, and they weren't on like Views or any of the torrent sites, or even pre-torrent, like, you know, SoulSeek and stuff. So I'm searching for this stuff for years and years and years. This is like, I'm just gonna say wrestlers' names, so it doesn't really matter. But certain themes I'm just, you know, dying to find. I found a website that had all of them, but you had to pay to get them. But it was a British website, so you had to pay in pounds, and you paid to use the site for X amount of time, and whatever you could download in that amount of time, you get to have. So I was like, okay.
What website is this? This is a crazy
insane. So I think I paid like it was like £5. So at that point, I think it was like, you know, $8 or something. So I had everything like queued up, and then like I hit the button for pay, and then I just went to each tab, was like speed downloading, and I essentially got all these things. So for like many years, these were themes that like nobody had, and I didn't even know anybody who cared about this stuff, so I wasn't able to like even cool guy anyone. Like, yo, I have Vader's 92 theme, I have the WCW Midnight Express theme, I have the
that's the one that took me forever to find, the Midnight.
Yeah, so dude, anything you want, I have it all. So here's something I'll tell. I like was protected over this for years now. I think it's funny to tell the truth about it, or, you know, expose this or whatever. All the Horseman theme songs from the 90s, like like the pre-Nitro Horseman theme songs, you couldn't find. So I found those. I was like, dude, so there's some sick like metal catalog stuff there. So being that WWE didn't have the rights to all this stuff, there's this one riff in Arn Anderson / 1990 Horseman entrance theme. I was like, yo, you know what? I am stealing this riff. No one's gonna know. No one's gonna hear it anywhere else. So I stole the riff, changed it like a little bit. I'm doing like air quotes a little bit. And I was like, yo, this riff is rad. I'm going to use it for Extinction AD. So this isn't even like it's like, 8 years ago now, or 7 years ago. And there it is. I record it. And then I'm, watching an older WCW show on the network, and I hear it. I was like, do they have rights to this shit now? So I go to a couple of other matches, and they do, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. And I told all the dudes I was doing at the time, and they're not wrestling guys. They don't give a shit. But 1990 Horsemen, like Wyndham had his own theme, Arn Anderson had his own theme, Flair, Vicious, yada yada. When they came out together, there was another theme. Eventually, Arn Anderson, WCW didn't make any sense, so it was inconsistent. But the main riff, I stole that riff and used it for the end of Instruments of Death, the Extinction AD song. It was like a single from the record and everything. You have like a fucking video for it and everything. I changed it a little bit and it's in different tuning, but I didn't change it that much, and it's probably the best riff on the record too.
Dude, that is amazing. I am an enormous Horseman guy, as Joe is. I think they're the absolute greatest of all time. A lot of these books that I have back here are actually Horseman books, and I don't remember the Horseman theme from 90. So if you have them, I would love to hear them.
Do I have your email address in? Okay, I got it. New York Enforcer. I will make a zip file of whatever will fit in an email, and and you'll see that I in fact have like over 30 variations on the Undertaker's entrance theme. It's disgusting. It's pathetic.
No, but dude, that's, we talked about it with music, we talked about it with wrestling. It literally is all encompassing. And you like, I know people follow you, Extinction AD, and the Stiff Shots podcast. Like, but dude, you're doing everything. So I commend the personal training. 11 bands, 7 podcasts. I know Extinction AD just launched a YouTube channel too, right?
Yeah. So we launched the channel. We'll eventually be putting other stuff on it. But as of right now, we're just doing like an actual like YouTube show called "It's Go Time, You Asshole," which is it's a every joke that I'm a part of, but me and all my friends, all our jokes are so convoluted they don't make any sense anymore. But it, as convoluted as that title is, we came up with the idea out of a convoluted joke, and we're like, let's actually do this. It is the band, as well as Pete Vandenberg, who used to be in the band, but he's like a unofficial, outsider member still. And we sit down, we crack open an energy drink. That's a surprise. Somebody brings in enough for everyone to drink. Hey, what are we drinking? Oh, it's this. Get a little. You still got me?
Yeah, we're good. No, you're good. You came right back.
Get some, get caffeinated, energized. We get a surprise topic of conversation. We'll bullshit for a little while, and that's it. We'll, we hang out, and essentially, like, I don't drink. The other dudes like beer. The other dudes do, but it's kind of like sitting down and getting drunk with your friends, but we're just getting caffeinated and bullshitting, and then
as a
put it on the internet.
All on Team Drunk, but as I'm older, Team Caffeinated is way better. So I want everybody check out the YouTube channel. And what are the where can they see you on Twitter, on Instagram? How many different accounts do you have for all of your different ventures?
Let me see if I can remember all this stuff. The band is at Extinction AD everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're just search Extinction AD channel because you have to get like a whole bunch of friends before you're allowed to tell everyone.
Oh, I know. I think it's like 7 years. Yeah.
On Instagram, at Stiff Shots Pod is where you could find Stiff Shots Podcast and everything we do under the Stiff Shots Podcast Network, which is the Meet Podcast, It's Go Time, You Asshole, Thrashers Slashers, Road to WrestleMania. You can find my show, Thrashers Slashers, Road to WrestleMania, at Thrash/Mania Pod on Instagram, at Mania Pod on Twitter. And I am everywhere, like Instagram and Twitter, at Rick as Hell. And I was, I'm so old. I was a part of Facebook when it was just like, hey, it's for like people who went to college. I was like, I'll just do that anyway because my friend told me to. But then once it became, a thing to argue with people about not being racist,
politics,
they're like, hey, you could customize your name. And I was like, I'm like either Rickterfuge or Rick as Hell everywhere. I'm gonna do something different. So my Facebook handle is I Know Everything About Wrestling.
Dude, are you serious?
Yeah, so if you type in www.facebook.com/I know everything about wrestling, you will see my my profile.
Dude, I just had a genius idea because Joe, I refer to Joe as WrestlePedia because I know a shit ton about wrestling. I've been watching wrestling forever. I have like an emotional knowledge of wrestling where Joe has a clerical, analytical, data, fucking scientist mind of wrestling. I'll be like, dude, I completely have no idea what the dark match was of SummerSlam 91. He's like, which one? The first one or the second one? So like, maybe on round 2, can we get maybe a trivia contest for you guys?
Oh, dude, I would love that. And the thing is, I was like, oh, out of everyone I know, I definitely know wrestling the most. And this is what 2008 or something. So I do that, and it's cool. And quickly after that, I met a lot of people that I'm almost like, oh no, this guy knows more about wrestling than I do. This guy definitely knows more about wrestling than I do. But
Dude,
I'm with you too. The stuff that I know, I really know. So Kings of the Ring, the Long Island.
You're looking at the
tribute.
camp of the trivia we went to Kings of the Ring at Amityville Music Hall, and I was on
Yes.
stage and I won the trivia because, all right, it's been long enough. I know we have to wrap it up, but this story has to be told. It's been 4 years. I'm on stage and they asked me 2 or 3 questions. And then the 4th question, he asks me, and Joe's in the fucking bowels of this place in the deep corner. There's like a and they asked me what the name for Howard Finkel was at WrestleMania 9. And I look over and I just see Joe go, and I'm like, Finkus Max. He fucking nailed it from 50 yards away. And I won a Quad XL Welcome to Suplex City Brock Lesnar t-shirt. And
Oh, I love it.
that is actually when I peaked, I think. I think it's all been downhill since 2016. But yeah.
I did
it's
one
so funny.
trivia up there with them one time, and I got up there and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm actually like nervous because my whole self-image will be destroyed
You
if
have
I
to
don't
change your
win.
Facebook name. I know a lot about wrestling. Did you win?
I don't remember losing, but I definitely didn't walk. Maybe I did walk out with something. You know what? I like to think that I won, but I wouldn't put money on it. But I really think I would remember it if I lost.
And what question? It would keep you up at night.
Yeah. And if I, won, I probably would, in my head, like, well, I don't remember it. Of course I fucking won.
If you beat Rick at Kings of the Ring and you remember the question, let us know at us on social media. But dude, listen, we appreciate your time so much. It has been an absolute blast. We would love to have you back and talk about I guess anything post 2000, get into AEW. You're watching AEW, right?
Yes, anytime. I stay up to date on WWE, NXT, and AEW. I was doing so good with New Japan. I always knew about New Japan. I would watch it hardly ever, but every so often. And once we started Stiff Shots, I was like, oh, why have I not been watching New Japan? I was just on it, and loving it. And at one point, I think it was once I started my own podcast, I was so overwhelmed that and the pandemic hit, I fell off of New Japan. So long story short, AEW, WWE, NXT, I'm always up to date.
No, I'm the same way with New Japan. Like I'll go back and I'll watch it like months before, but I won't keep super up to date with it. So we'll definitely touch upon the modern days of professional wrestling. And being that I trust YouTube to be far smarter and superior in the knowledge department than I am, I will come up with 5 categories. I'm so fucking pumped for this. I cannot wait. Joe, are you prepared? Are you going to study, Joe? How are you going to handle this?
Here's the problem, Rick. All right. So yes, I mean I'll be prepared, but here's the problem, right? So Mike's definition of trivia questions are a little bit different than I'm used to. So Mike will ask you questions like, who was the color commentator at the Royal Rumble 1994? Like things like that. Like you're going to need to know. That's the kind of shit that he asks, right? It's not like,
I'm going to ask, what color did Hogan wear at WrestleMania 9?
He was yellow, red and yellow.
The tag match or the Yokozuna?
You see what I mean? See, like you want me to throw you a layup, Joe? Like what do you want? Like I want to know what knee Shawn Michaels injured at SummerSlam
90?
90. Yep. Against Power and Glory.
Yeah, the same one he had in the motorcycle accident leading up to that event. How about that?
This is gonna be so fucking good. I can't wait. What's the name of Power and Glory's finishing move?
The Powerplex.
Powerplex.
Oh,
Dude,
so here
I can't-
again, something probably nobody cares about. Zombie Sailor Toys finally doing Paul Roma and Hercules action figures in the retro Hasbro.
in the cutoff.
Yeah, in the Hasbro 1990 fashion. Man, I'm so embarrassed about how excited I am about toys at almost 41 years old.
Dude, it's okay. Do you go to the Wrestling Universe store in Comac? Have you been there?
I have been. That's relatively close to my house. But the thing is, same thing when I got rid of my CDs. I've got rid of all my toys aside from my 90s Hasbro, 90s Galoob, and current Mattel retros. So I'm very, very choosy about what I will spend money on toy wise because it's like a dumb thing to do as an adult. But you know, if something is in that Hasbro realm, I gotta buy it.
Yeah, I could see that. I love the old school feel. I have a bunch of like individual ones. I have like Tito Santana sitting in the back. The guy was like, "Dude, I'll give you big money for him." I was like, they're just sitting there, but I'm not ready to part with them.
Yep.
I'm wildly emotional and attached to things at 34. I'm going to be the same way at 44. So,
yep.
Listen, dude, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate it. I hope everybody checks out your YouTube, every single one of the shows. I know we have a Subterfuge record coming soon.
We're working on it. You know what? We got music written. The main thing holding us back right now is me relearning how to play drums.
Okay. Well, I think Ed said he hasn't played in like 10 years too. So you guys are going to be fine. I'm stoked to get back. Extinction AD is doing great, man. Listen, thanks again for your time, and hopefully we'll catch you real soon for part 2 and the trivia.
Just let me know. I'll come back anytime.
Awesome. That's it for another edition of the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast. Follow everywhere your social media at All Night Long WP, and be sure to check out Born Scum Clothing Company. Use promo code All Night Long for 10% off. That's it for another edition of the show, and we are tapping out.
Best friends.